Opinions are sharply divided when it comes to Occupy Wall Street. Some have derided it as a flash-in-the-pan left-wing anarchism that has failed to resonate with the American people. Others say it's an organic protest movement that represents the best of a democratic society. Joining us from New York now to discuss this is American investment consultant Peter Schiff. He also heads Euro Pacific Capital, a Wall Street brokerage firm. And with us here in the studio is Democratic media analyst Ryan Clayton. He's also the founder of 100 Proof Politics, a political news and blog website. Welcome both to the show. Let me start with you, Ryan. Occupy Wall Street coined this phrase, "We are the 99%, basically separating almost all Americans from the very rich, the very wealthy. Has the movement actually made ordinary Americans see banks and the rich in a different light, in your estimation?
Well, the folks on Wall Street, the top 1% of our economy, have consolidated the gains of the last 30 to 40 years. And what they've done is essentially funneled the world's wealth to 1% of the American population, of essentially the world's wealthiest individuals. Unfortunately, that's the culmination of this radical right-wing social experiment known as trickle-down economics. It just doesn't work. You can't give all the money to the top and have it trickle down. That is a broken theory. It's a failure, and George W. Bush proved that when he gave all these tax cuts to the rich. And what did we get? We got a failure of an economy, and we almost had a 21st century Great Depression, And then that was only amplified by the politics of the Tea Party, which made it even worse by throwing our system into a default crisis and threatening to shut down the government. This isn't the things we need to be doing. We need to be creating jobs in this country, and that's going to come from creating purchasing power in the middle class.
Well, let me give Peter a chance to jump in here because he's smiling quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I'm laughing at this revisionist bit of history that we're hearing. I agree, we need more purchasing power, and it comes from free market capitalism. It comes from production, and production comes from savings, underconsumption, investment. All these things are being inhibited. You might call it trickle-down economics, but Adam Smith called it capitalism, and that's what it is. You might not believe in that system. You might believe that Marxism works, but it doesn't. And, part of the big problem with Occupy Wall Street and the protest movement is I sympathize with the anger that a lot of Americans have, and they should be angry, but they are directing their anger in the wrong place. It's not capitalism. It's not the 1%. It's the government. It's the government that stacked the deck against them. It's the central banking. It's the central planning. I agree, some people have gotten rich off of this system that we've developed, but it's not capitalism. The people who are getting rich rent-seeking from the government, I agree, there should have been no bailouts for the banks.
I agree with Peter.
Banks should have been allowed to fail.
Yeah,
That's capitalism.
I agree with Peter.
The banks never would have been in the position they were in if it wasn't for the government. It was the government that laid the foundation for the financial crisis.
Well, if you went down to Occupy Wall Street and you talked to the folks that were there, what you would hear is that there's a lot of people that think
the private sector
let Ryan jump in here for just a second, Peter.
I think if you went down to Occupy Wall Street and you talked to the folks that were there, you'd realize that, yeah, they do see the problem as twofold. There's a government that doesn't represent their voice, and there's an economy that doesn't serve their interests. And those two problems are intertwined because the people on Wall Street have essentially bought and sold a lot of our politicians because of our broken campaign finance laws. So yes, I agree that part of the problem is that we have a government that's not representing our interests. But I would also say we have an economy that's not serving our interests. Most middle-class families know that we've got serious problems right now. We're in the middle of an unemployment emergency. There is a foreclosure epidemic, and we're witnessing the destruction of the middle class right before our very eyes. And that's America's greatest invention, is a middle class that has the purchasing power to put food on the table, provide for their families, and have a little bit of money left over to enjoy life too.
Well, let me ask you, Peter.
Where did the middle class
hold on for just a second.
It came from the entrepreneurs.
Peter, hold on for just a second. I want to ask you a quick question if I can. You say that you are part of the 1% and you defend the 1%, and you've actually gone down and talked to these people at Occupy Wall Street. What's your beef with them?
Well, as I said, my beef is that they don't understand the root of the problem, and it's government. We need more freedom. If we have more freedom, then we're going to have more jobs, and we'll have productive jobs. The reason that there's so much unemployment in America right now is because the government has artificially driven up the cost of labor. And so labor is unemployed because it's too expensive.
But Peter, part of it, too, is that the rich are sitting on the money and they're not actually hiring people, too. I mean, that really is a given.
If giving all the money of the world's wealthiest individuals was going to solve our problems, if trickle-down economics worked, then we'd be swimming in jobs right now. But that is just not the case. We're in an unemployment emergency that has been caused by a financial crisis on Wall Street that happened because people there essentially robbed the pensions of this country. They robbed the baby boomers of this country. They've stolen the money that people invested in the stock market, and they still have that money. And I think what's got to happen is we've got to create jobs in this country. We have to make sure that everybody has the... How do you create jobs? You put people back to work through government programs or through the private sector. Either way, you have to create jobs.
No,
and
no,
when you do that, what's going to happen is people are going to take small money. You asked a question, let me answer it. You asked a question, let me answer it.
Where is the government going to get the money to hire people?
You're going to take that money, you're going to hire people. Those people are going to go spend it in small businesses throughout their communities,
but where
right?
is the money
and
because
because there's
from
demand in the
salaries?
economy, you have to create products. When you create those products, you have to hire people to produce those products, and that is what creates jobs. Demand in the economy is what's going to create jobs.
And what are the government
there is no supply side solution to this problem.
There's
just no supply side solution to this problem.
Of the economy.
Peter, I'm sorry. Can you go again?
Look, the government can't hire people. The government doesn't have any money. The government has to take money from the private sector in order to employ somebody in the public sector. But we don't want jobs. We want the production associated with jobs.
We don't want jobs?
If the government hires people, they're not going to produce anything.
We don't want jobs. Every American wants jobs right now. We want closer to full employment. We have an unemployment emergency. I'd encourage you to go throughout this country and talk to people who are desperate for a job right now, whether it's from the government or whether it's from private business or whether it's from a small business, which is what creates 2/3 of jobs in America. But the one thing I know is we can't count on Wall Street to create jobs because they're not doing it. They already got bailed out, and they're still not creating jobs, and they're still not loaning money, and there's still serious problems in our economy.
Hold on for just a second. Let's give Peter a chance.
And it's the fault of people like you, Peter.
Hold on for just a second, Peter. Go ahead.
No, wait a minute. I employ 150 people. How many people do you employ?
I work for a business
with
a great
anybody?
employer.
But you don't employ anybody, so you don't know where jobs come from because you don't create them. And I can tell you that I
jobs
create
by stealing money off
to make
Wall
a
Street?
profit
By
for
stealing money out of
myself.
pension funds? Is that how you create jobs? Because a burglar is a job too.
I don't steal money from anybody.
You have? But by speculating on the stock market and driving up the prices of commodities throughout the world so people starve, is that how you create jobs, Peter?
Ryan, hold on for just a second. I want Peter to get a chance.
Yeah, Ryan doesn't understand anything about jobs or why we have them or why we need them. We don't even want jobs. People would rather retire. What we want is the production associated with jobs. We want more consumer goods so our life is better. So how do we create productive jobs? That's free market capitalism. You need to have an employer that has a profit motive and has the capital to employ people.
Okay, but Peter, let me ask you a question. There's also no shortage of people in poverty here in the United States. We went through the stats, 46 million people living in poverty in the United States. That's more than the combined populations of Canada, Finland, and Norway. Isn't there something wrong with a system where there's that many people poor in this country while the wealthy are doing just fine right now?
Well, first of all, poverty is always relative, so you have to look at poor people relative to, poor people in America could be, well off by other standards. But I agree, the country is getting poorer because the government is getting bigger. We no longer have the vibrant free market economy that we used to have, where we have limited government and maximum freedom and maximum economic growth. It's the government that is starving the middle class. It's the government that's impoverishing everybody.
Let me give Ryan a chance to talk about this figure too. 46 million Americans in poverty. As I said, much larger than if you combine the populations of Canada, Finland, and Norway.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge problem that was created, frankly, by people like Peter speculating on Wall Street and playing around with everybody's money and gambling like it's a casino, like it doesn't really matter, like it's all a game of numbers. And that's just not the case. Those numbers are people. Those people are hurting right now throughout America. There's millions of people without jobs. There's millions of people who can't afford to pay the mortgage. There's millions of people. There's millions of people out there who can't put food on the table because of people like Peter who speculate on the stock market, drive up the cost of goods, drive up.
You're not hiring anybody.
Let me bring it back.
You haven't written one paycheck.
Okay, Peter. Let's bring it back to the original premise. And the premise is Occupy Wall Street. A year later, Peter, what do you think it's done? Has it created a conversation, a debate in this country? Has it moved things forward? Short answer, if you can.
No, I mean, nothing has changed. Look at Ben Bernanke with QE3. What is the goal of QE3? The Fed is trying to artificially stimulate the housing market by lowering mortgage rates so we can go deeper into debt, so we can spend more money. The government is repeating all the mistakes that inflated the housing bubble, that led to the financial crisis, that caused the protest on Wall Street in the first place. So we've done nothing. We're embracing the same socialistic central banking policies that almost destroyed the economy before, But next time, it's not going to be almost. We're going to have complete destruction. And the only solution is going to be to go back to the free market and to really let capitalism function.
All right.
If it was
We'll
up
leave
to
it
your
there,
other
Peter.
guests, we'd all be swimming in government-created poverty.
Thank
we
you,
have plenty
Peter.
of printing
Let's
press money,
throw it over to
and we'd all
Ryan
have
for your
menial
final
jobs
thoughts
with
if we
nothing
can.
to show
Peter,
for it.
thanks so much. Ryan?
Yeah, so Occupy Wall Street fundamentally changed the conversation in America. Before we were talking about default crises and the Tea Party and all these ridiculous things, and what we're talking about now is economic inequality and how people who work hard for a living and play by the rules just aren't being rewarded. And we're punishing hardworking people in this country right now, and that's just not what America's supposed to stand for. Occupy really brought that issue to the forefront again. They went to the doorstep of Wall Street and said, you know what? I've got a great education, I played by all the rules, I want a good job too, and I want to be able to create a family in the greatest country on earth. But the problem is that there's a certain amount of people who have decoupled productivity from economic gains. They've decoupled wages from the productivity of this country. So while people on Wall Street are making millions and billions, there's people in the middle class in middle America who are not making the money that they used to make, even working the same job. And what we've got to do is fix that problem. We've got to say, if you work hard for a living, then you should get a fair wage for a hard day's work.
We're going to have to leave it
I
there.
agree, but if we're going to have this
Peter,
massive
thanks.
government,
Ryan,
then
thank
it's
you
never
very
gonna
much.
happen. If
We've
we
run
want
out of
the middle
time. I wish
class
we
to
could
come
talk
back,
further, but we
we've
can't.
got to